Retro Witch says if you get into a payment plan with the IRS and you need to sell your home and you own your home outright, will the IRS take everything you owe all at once at time of closing? Retro Witch. That depends on if the IRS filed a notice of federal tax lien against you, as well as the amount indicated on that notice of federal tax lien. So, notice of federal tax lien is a notice that the IRS files with your county recorder's office, and in some cases with your state as well, that basically puts the whole world on notice that you owe the IRS money. So when you're going to sell your house, there's going to be a title search done that will uncover, and like a lien search done that will uncover any potential liens, either on the property or against you. And so let's say this home you own outright, let's say it's worth $500,000. And the IRS filed notice of federal tax lien for your $200,000 of tax debt. Well, when you go to sell your home, right, there's going to be the $500,000 that you sell the home for, less your closing costs, and then there's going to be this pot of money at the end of it, and the escrow company is just going to wire the IRS that whatever that is, right, on that lien. Well, you could call the IRS to get like a payoff amount, right, which will be a more exact figure, especially if you paid off some debt, right? But the IRS still has, the lien for the full amount. You could call the IRS and get a payoff amount. So it depends if there's notice of federal tax lien filed, Retro Witch. You say if you're in a payment plan with the IRS. Well, there are payment plans that do result in a lien with the IRS, and there's payment plans that don't result in a lien with the IRS, right? So oftentimes when we get clients into a payment plan, we're able to get them into a payment plan that does not result in a notice of federal tax lien being filed against them, right? So even if they were to sell their house, they would just get all the proceeds, right? After closing costs and broker commission, all that is paid. So, but over a certain amount, even if you get in a payment plan with the IRS, they're probably going to file a notice of federal tax lien against you just to protect the government's interests. If you get in a hardship-based payment plan, like a partial payment installment agreement, link to my video about PPAs at the top of the screen, the IRS is going to file a notice of federal tax lien against you to protect the government's interests. Okay, so I don't really know for sure, Retro Witch, about your specific situation without actually looking at your file with the IRS, but those are just some off-the-cuff thoughts. You give some more context here in the next couple sentences. You say your 80-year-old father-in-law owes over $100,000 in debt. Okay, is that just the tax debt, or is that like his entire debt load? But needs to sell his home because he owes property taxes and needs the equity money to live off of, as well as to pay cash for a small home we want to sell to help with that, but are afraid he will lose everything. Retro Witch, I would say you want to figure out what's going on with the IRS. If there's a lien filed, first of all, there is a notice of federal tax lien filed in situations like this. Your father-in-law is pretty old. He's 80. He does need, the IRS does acknowledge that, people need some money to live off of, right? Especially if they're a retired 80-year-old. And the older people are, oftentimes the more likely it is that the IRS may agree to either a doubt as to collectability offering compromise in special circumstances, or even an effective tax administration offering compromise that lets the taxpayer keep some of their equity in their assets when they wouldn't necessarily probably agree to something like that for a younger person. Okay, so there may be options here, Retro Witch, for you that could result in your father-in-law, at least keeping some of that equity that he has in his home, despite the debts that he has. But it all depends on the situation. Another question I have is, how old is this debt? Most of the folks who come to us who are older, like 80s, which is kind of the oldest age bracket, I guess we have had a client in her 90s, but 80s, that's typically the oldest where we see people having tax debt, right? Because any tax debt somebody had, it probably would have dropped off by the time they were 90, right? Because there's only 10 years the IRS has to collect the debt, right? So, it's rare you see a 95-year-old come in who somehow racked up a whole bunch of tax debt at 85. I mean, it can happen, right? If there's like a wealthy family situation or, something like this. But for most folks who are retiring with a little nest egg, they're getting their Social Security, maybe some other kind of pension, you're not going to see this massive tax debt really racked up in their older years. Exceptions would be liquidity events, selling a rental property, taking a massive one-time distribution out of like a pre-tax account, like an IRA or something. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying, it's fairly rare for the average Joe or Jane retiree to be racking up a whole ton of tax debt in their 70s and 80s. Okay, so my mind, what I'm getting to here is my mind is now going to the question of, well, how old is this tax debt that your 80-year-old father-in-law has? Did he incur this recently, like in his mid to late 70s? Or is this something maybe he had during his working years, right? I don't know when he retired, but let's say he retired in his 60s. Maybe he had a one-time big liquidity event when he retired or something, and that created a large tax debt. And now it's over 10 years since then. Maybe the tax debt's dropped off, right? Maybe it's hit the CSET, the collection statute expiration date. I don't know, Retro-Witch. I mean, these are the kinds of questions that, I and my team of tax professionals at Choice Tax Relief, that we ask people about their tax situation, and we do, an investigation into their tax account with the IRS to see exactly where things stand. There's only so much that I can answer in a YouTube video in response to a comment where I don't know all the information. But it was a good question, Retro-Witch. And that your questions do have answers. It's just a lot of times the answer is, hey, we need to talk to the IRS about your case, right? Before we can really kind of give you any kind of definite answer on things. Even then, sometimes things are great. Anyway, folks, if you are dealing with tax debt, unfiled tax returns, any kind of income tax, payroll tax, sales tax problem, give us a call at Choice Tax Relief, 866-8000-TAX, or visit choicetaxrelief.com, fill out the form on there, and we'll reach out to you. I also have some other tax relief videos here on the left-hand side of the screen for your education and enjoyment. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.